on our specially designed tread.
Go. To make this car, Lambo's engineers had a good grunge in Volkswagen's parts code. So the engine, a 42 V8, is from a era. The rear axle and air suspension is from a Bentley Bentayga. The platform on which it sits and a lot of the dashboard is from Audi SQ7. So does that mean this isn't really a Lamborghini at all? Oh, my Urus is a bit twitchy. Something to take your doctor. Come on, turn!
Now we'd find out what's what on our specially designed tread.
Go. To make this car, Lambo's engineers had a good grunge in Volkswagen's parts code. So the engine, a 42 V8, is from a era. The rear axle and air suspension. Blacked out, yeah? Went up speeding. Oh, my Urus is a bit twitchy. Something to take your doctor. Drive my foot into the floor! Look at that for a tidy line. No! Get on with it. Come on, you can have her! Come on!
For lap after lap, the big, heavy Urus clawed at the rear end of the 911 Turbo.
Oh, God! Really? No!
But eventually, I had to admit defeat.
I can't get past that 911, and that's just an end of it. But I can keep up. And in an off-road car, that is fairly astonishing. It really is.
Certainly, I can believe...
That was fun, yeah, nice day out.
I got paid for that.
That was your job.
That was work. Doing that is my work. It probably won't be the fastest off-road car in the world for very long, though, because both Aston Martin and Ferrari have got big SUVs coming out this year.
Yeah, whatever. Thing is, could you really tell people that you have a Urus? Because it sounds like a minor alien out of Star Trek.
Yeah.
But it does work as a Lamborghini.
Yeah. But no.
Well, this is excellent consumer advice.
Yeah. Very clear, very clear.
The thing is, after I made that film, which was quite good fun, I came home and I thought, the trouble is, it could do with being a bit more Aventador-ish. It could do with being... Let's do this.
This time, though, the death sent shockwaves through the motor...
Here we go!
Having cut his teeth in sports car racing in the late 50s, Clark's speed and talent was spotted by Lotus boss Colin Chapman, who signed him for his Formula One team in 1960. Clark soon set the motorsport world alight, especially in this car. The Lotus 25.
It's a bloody new one.
Oh my God! I am sitting where Jim Clark sat!
We're off.
Oh my God! I am sitting where Jim Clark sat!
Time to play.
This is electrifying! These were not powerful cars! They only made 210 brake horsepower for 1.5 litres, but they were still good for 180 miles an hour. Oh!
Thanks to its revolutionary monocoque chassis, the 25 was stiffer and lighter than any other F1 car, which meant it wasn't just fast on the straights, but quicker through the corners too.
Here we go!
Time to be victorious.
And in the 1963 season, Clark used it to win a record 7 out of the 10 Grand Prix.
Winner is Jim Clark. Nobody could possibly catch him now.
But 1963 was just a warm-up for what was to come. To get a true picture of Clark's genius, we must look at another year, 1965, when he hit heights no driver had reached before, or has done since. A modern Formula One driver does 21 races a year and often complains that's too many. In 1965, Jim Clark raced in 63 races. Some of these cars look similar, but they are all completely different. In a car like this, he'd do Formula One Championship. He raced in the British Formula 2 Championship and the French Formula 2 Championship in this car. He raced in the Tasman Series, a sort of Australian Grand Prix for Down Under, in this car. And then there's this Lotus Cortina, in which he decided to race in touring cars. And then if all that wasn't enough, he decided to go for the Indy 500. First up was the Tasman's 2 races. He was jumping into his Lotus Cortina and racking up touring car victories.
Go!
Now this bit is really scary. Everything you've got. Oh my God. What a car. It is mighty. Oh, ha, ha. Oh, God. Unleash the beast! Oh my God!
And on top of all that, there was America.
The Indianapolis 500 has been called the greatest spectacle.
Prestigious race would be a tough challenge. Oval racing at higher average speeds than he was used to against seasoned Indy veterans. For the Indy 500, Clark raced a specially developed Lotus upstart from across the pond, take a rookie driving test before he could compete.
Go!
Come on, this is it! go.
Come Indy weekend, the upstart from across the pond qualified on the front row. And then, in the race itself, Clark, up against America's finest oval racers, won by just over 2 minutes.
Jim Clark, first European to win at Indianapolis since 1916.
Mexican race.
Could have driven the car anywhere near as quickly as Jimmy did because he was just so precise.
This is dangerous because of you.
Besides a supernatural ability to coax speed out of the car, Clark possessed another vital skill.
A lot of...
For example, he was leading the race when his gearbox started to let go.
Did he give up? Nope. Instead, he drove the rest of the race, and we're talking 160 miles an hour in the wet, with one hand on the steering wheel and the other holding the gear lever in place. And he still won. By nearly 5 minutes. So let's just sum up Clark's season of 1965. Of the 63 races he contested, he won a staggering 31 of them and was on the podium a further 8 times. He was now seen as the greatest racing driver of all time, in demand the world over. Yet this shy Scotsman chose to mark the year's achievements with a modest celebration at his hometown back in Scotland.
The next 2 years, by contrast, were a disaster, with multiple mechanical failures denying him another championship. However, in 1968, driving the Lotus 49, another game-changer from Colin Chapman, Clark took the first win of the year in South Africa and looked set for another dominant season.
Congratulations, Jim. This is an absolutely splendid effort. Okay, thank you very much.
And then on the weekend of April the 7th, Clark had a choice of 2 races he could compete in. One at Brands Hatch, the other a Formula 2 race at Hockenheim. Fatefully, he entered the German race.
April the 7th is a bad day for me. He wasn't happy. It was freezing cold and damp, misty. We could not get any heat into the tyres. Couldn't get any temperature in them, no matter what we did. Jimmy said to me, "Father, I do not expect anything from me today. Just
get a bloody move on." Here we go! All of that's amazing. What I find truly amazing is how many championships he took part in. I mean, can you imagine Lewis Hamilton getting out of his Formula 1 car and saying, "I haven't got time for any interviews. Hurry up!" Good night. Get a bloody move on. Hurry up! But this week, the Grand Tour is focusing mostly on China. And over there, things are a bit different. As recently as the 1980s, people here would lie awake at night, dreaming of having enough money to buy a mule. Whereas now, just 30 years later, they dream of being able to buy a honky. Specifically this honky, the L5. Here we go! Eventually, we arrived at the location for our first test. When you finished, for every one of the targets that haven't gone off.
Oh, I'm slightly alarmed. Oh my God! Watch this. Here we go. Oh,
no. When you finished, for every one of the targets that haven't gone off.
Go, go, go! Are you ready?
When you finished, for every one of the targets that haven't gone off.